Okay, I'm live. And here we are on Google Translate. Murayama has responded to my email. I have somebody giving a legitimate translation, or working on a legitimate translation for me, which I will use in the video. But in the meantime, I want to show you guys the gist of what it says. So this was the email he sent me. Here is Google's translation of it. It's a little rough, but it at least gives us some idea of what his response is. So, always I am indebted. My name is Murayama of Blue Moon Studio. The RPG I was developing before Genzo Suikoden was a cell phone. It means like a mobile game, a handheld game, planned by Konami itself. It is for game consoles, and its content is a large amount of classes, about 70 to 80, with a sword in that class, from the craftsmen and sorcerers to bakeries. Basically just tons of different classes. The main goal is to change the number of characters at this stage. It is the same as RPG and a game with a lot of characters such as Genzo Suikoden. That idea did not exist. So what he's saying is that the story for Genzo Suikoden did not exist at that time. It was different. He'll elaborate on that in a minute. Hello, Rob. At this time, the main character's best friend, there was a character called Do. I'm guessing that's going to be Ted when it's translated legitimately. This story has nothing to do with Genzo Suikoden. So that's the big part, right? The part that I was suspicious of all along. The story of the RPG that he was making for Konami's console was not related whatsoever to Suikoden. He did not write Suikoden 2 first. When Nami's, I'm guessing that's a shorthand for Konami. When Konami's portable game machine project was canceled, development was canceled at the same time. Tori was completely abandoned. I don't know what he means by Tori. It's probably bad translation. However, when I later made the story of Genzo Suikoden 1, I decided to use my personality. So, answer 1. The story was only in the early stages and was canceled halfway. So he had not completed the story of the game made for Konami's console. It was not a completed story. It was canceled before he could even finish the story portion of it. This RPG story has nothing to do with Genzo Suikoden. Note that the names Ryo and Joey are from Genzo Suikoden 2, especially Ryo. I'm curious to see what this will be when it's translated legitimately, because I think what he's trying to say here, which is elaborated here, this is only a novel version and was thought by the author in charge of novelization. This name for the main character, Ryo, was not something he came up with. It was not like his intention for the main character's name to be this, because it's a silent protagonist and you can name him whatever you want. But there was a novelization of the story made later where somebody called the character this, and that became kind of the canon name later on. It was not his naming of the character. Answer 3. So that being said, this could not have been the name of the character in this RPG made for Konami back here. So that part, which was said by the Level magazine article, is 100% false. Answer 3. This story was canceled due to the impact of the project cancellation. Yeah, so this story idea did not see the light of day after the cancellation of the project, I'm guessing is what he's saying there. After this RPG has been discontinued, a new RPG for PlayStation will be developed. It was, at this time, as a selling point of this new title, an RPG with a Lactor was invented. I can't make sense of. I don't know what this is supposed to be, so I'll have to wait on the official translation for that. I myself was also interested in the Chinese classics. Many characters close to the main character, such as Putin Tsubasa and Saint Seiya, appear. He's saying that there are characters in Suikoden with names that are inspired by Captain Tsubasa and Saint Seiya, the mangas. It was an image of a cartoon. However, when appearing when giving a presentation to Konami executives, in the end, it was supported by the presentation of Suikoden, and finally it became a shape. That's a story we had read before. The boss was like, "Oh, like Suikoden, right?" And he was like, "Well, not exactly like that," but he didn't really speak up, and then they ended up making it like Suikoden, the Chinese classic, right? I think that the game scenario is not independent of story alone. I think that it snuggles up to the stem. I don't know what he means by this exactly yet, but I think he's transitioning here from answering my questions about the story of when Suikoden 2's, well, maybe not quite yet, but anyways, he answers some more questions about the difficulties of game development. So he says, after the selling point of this project is decided, it is created together with the game system. The scenario Genzo Suikoden is scenario of Genzo Suikoden 2. I did not think at all. Again, this is a poorly translated paragraph. I can't really make sense of it. I could speculate, but I'm not going to do that yet. Answer 4. The story of Genzo Suikoden 2 was thought after 1. Another confirmation that he did not write Genzo Suikoden 1 as a prequel to the story he really wanted to write. That is not true. He didn't think of the story of Suikoden 2 until after Genzo Suikoden 1 was made. Although Genzo Suikoden 2 was also successful due to the success of Genzo Suikoden, the development system itself has not matured so much in most of the texts I am alone. I decided to write. I guess he's saying that he wrote a lot of the game by himself. In particular, write a huge line of NPCs in the city where the number of people increases and changes according to the scenario. Or I remember staying at the company for several months and working. Yes, this is Google translated because I don't have an official translation yet. I'm waiting for someone to do that for me. This, I think, is probably referencing the fact that he like stayed and like slept at work, kind of a thing. I still could, Rob, if he's open to it. I still need to respond to this email and thank him for this, so I could say, would you mind sending me a picture or something that I can use in the video for you? Many NPCs in the midnight office, sometimes children, sometimes old man. He's talking about, I think, making different NPC characters, and he was there at the office late working on it. While I was writing, I was tired, and the voices of various people began to sound like hearing. So here, and this was confirmed by Heon, who has not translated it for me, but just let me know, certain parts of it. He started hearing voices while he was working on the game. That's how fatigued he was. So he's working on these NPCs at the office, long hours, killing himself, overworking, and he started to hear voices of people, basically. Perhaps that work has shortened my life by several years. The above is the answer. Please contact us if you have any questions or additional questions. I am looking forward to the article. Thank you. So, though this is a terrible Google translation, we at least get the gist that the suspicion of the rumor that he wrote Suikoden 2 first, shelved it because he didn't feel he had enough experience, and so he wrote a prequel story first and then returned to the story he really wanted to tell, is just bogus, 100% false. Not the case. That's not the story of the Konami Game Machine RPG he was working on. It was something totally different. He never finished it, and it was canceled and moved on from. And he wrote Suikoden 1 first, and then he conceived Suikoden 2 after Suikoden 1. So this is going to be, I think, really big for the channel, especially considering the fact that gonna have to release it with Japanese subs. I actually wonder if there's like a Japanese Wikipedia page that has different information. But anyways, we all know that the development is not fleshed out here, but this, I assume, will change drastically once our video drops, and that our video will become the Wikipedia source for the information here. And I think, Hat was saying he has a connection with the guys at RPG Site. If they were to do a write-up on it with this correction, that the video could end up being pretty big. Because this is information that people have bought into this story behind how the story of Suikoden 2 was made for years. Probably ever since the Level article in 2009 at least. So this is going to kind of upend everyone's idea. I mean, I've seen every channel I've ever seen talk about Suikoden 2, they said this. Every retrospective I've seen online, Lore Runner's rumination on it, he says this. Like, everybody repeats this sentiment, and it's 100% false. So this could end up being huge, and I'm really, really excited to get the video out as soon as possible so that this correct information can be circulated out there. So, yeah. I was pumped last night when I got the email response. It was like 3 a.m. and I was like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, I was right. So I jumped on Discord and I tagged everybody. And anyways, I don't have the official translation yet. I'm going to need that in order to quote him. But we can, at the very least, start thinking about how we're going to segue into this and figure out how we want to go about talking about it. Because one thing I don't want to do is necessarily throw shade at Level or Game Informer or anything like that. I don't want to be like, these guys are wrong, right? That's not the point. The point is just to detail it the correct way. So, let me see here. My Suikoden 2 retrospective, there it is. Next, you're going to have to contact Ubisoft about how many copies of Prince of Persia sold. That is true. But it's really got me thinking. I mean, I've shared this in the past, right? About how I wanted to shift away from doing reviews where I give value judgments on games and rather just get into more of the journalistic side of it, where it's an investigation and telling the story and documenting of the people behind the game, the artists who made it, and the process they went through to create it. I think that's more in line with the brand promise now and identity of Resonant Arc, which is about deepening the appreciation for the audience of these games that they grew up with. So, you know, showing the hard work that went into it, the intention behind it, and doing like sort of a deep dive analysis like the last two videos I put out about the thematic content of the games, or even possibly, you know, gameplay systems and you know, why they're so interesting. That's still a possibility. Like, I still want to do a video about good tutorials and talk about, like, say, Kingdom Hearts 1. If I were to do a video on battle systems, I would definitely include like Radiant Historia as one of my favorite battle systems. Like, it's still open to that, but mostly I want to focus on narrative stuff. But in any case, reaching out to a company like Ubisoft or you know, English-speaking game developers as well, to do interviews with them and kind of just shift the focus of the channel onto that side of it would be freaking awesome. So I'm hoping this can serve as kind of a launch pad to that, at least for the Japanese developers. But I'd also really like to do it for games like Prince of Persia or something like that, right? No, I know they're like a French-Canadian company, but like even, I don't know, just other Western RPGs that I've grown up, you know, enjoying as well would be cool. So Rob says, come to Resonant Arc for the ungarnished truth, people. It has become a common myth that blank, but in fact blank. Yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I'm thinking. Let's read what we got so far and see how we want to, when and how we want to segue into this. When Suikoden launched in December of 1995, it arrived early enough to become one of the very first sprawling JRPGs to land on the PS1, a platform which would later become a nest and haven for the genre as a whole. The timing was fortunate, seeing as powerhouses from Squaresoft were soon to follow, and at the time, Suikoden was even considered by some to be a warm-up to games like Final Fantasy VII and Wild Arms. Due to being first to the party, so to speak, it sold well, meriting... it sold maybe relatively well. Sold relatively well, meriting a sequel in the eyes of the higher-ups at Konami, so Yoshitaka Murayama, the series creator, got to work thinking about where the series should go next. During the course of the first game's development, Murayama had chosen to stick with sprite-based art. I could possibly do it right there. Like, bam, right at the beginning. It's commonly believed that Suikoden 2's story was actually written first. But that's not the case. So we could do it right there. I could see that working. During the course of the first game's development, Murayama had chosen to stick with sprite-based art rather than building the game in 3D, because in 1994 he simply wasn't impressed by the early tests demonstrating the possibilities of the new technology. The early polygon tests I saw were not impressive. I think the technology was still too young. 3D models didn't feel like people, they were too expressionless. We chose to make a pixel-based game instead, because we would be better able to express the characters and give them more soul. However, once it was time to move forward with a sequel, PlayStation games were beginning to push the boundaries of what could be accomplished with 3D graphics, with contemporaries like Final Fantasy setting the standard for what players would expect from RPGs moving forward. However, given the smaller budget Konami could allocate to the project, Murayama felt he had a hard choice ahead of him. Upon examining the feedback from fans of the first title, Murayama noticed that the majority of the most passionate players seemed drawn to Suikoden's story and world above anything else. We noticed that players really loved the world and characters we had created. All the letters we got, all the responses were about the story and the world it took place in. People got immersed in our universe and were spellbound by the characters we filled it with. Once we realized that we could only afford to either develop better graphics or develop Suikoden's world more, the choice was obvious. We chose the world. Hello, Dude McGuy. This feedback was key in closing the door on the decision, and though there might have been some concern about that Suikoden 2 would not hold up visually to what other developers were doing on the platform, Konami at least believed that moving forward with sprite-based or with sprite art would sufficiently meet fans' expectations and also give Murayama and his team the time and freedom needed to further develop a world and story that would captivate their audience. These quotes are confirmed, yes. These come from legitimate interviews with him. They are direct quotes from him. The Level article that makes the claim that Ryo and Joey were the names of the characters, they were not quoting him when they said that. That was why it was fishy to me to begin with. Because there are some quotes from Murayama in that. Here, let's actually open that up. 1 second. Where did I put that? Where did it go? Maybe I downloaded it onto my desktop. Or I thought I did. Hold on, I gotta find this now. Or wait a minute, I think I know where it is. I think I put it onto the external hard drive. No, I Google translated it, and Zenmen's is working on a translation right now, an official one. So I know the gist of what it says, but the official translation is coming from Zenmen's, who is working on it. Let's see here. Suikoden 2. This. So my buddy who translated the Swedish Level article, right? There are some quotes from Murayama in this, which is what's so weird about it, because he obviously freaking interviewed the guy, but then there are some claims he makes here that are not quoted. So when he says things like, the idea for the jobs indeed was discarded, but Murayama would return to the story several years later in Suikoden 2. For the time being, however, the thing stood on docket. When he makes claims like that, there's no quote from Murayama. He never quotes him when he says anything about, the issue that I've been skeptical of. But there are other places where he is quoting him directly. And all the places where he quotes him directly, these are confirmed by him in other articles, like the Untold History of Japanese Game Developers, the book that I pulled a lot of info from the first video. Like, all of the parts that are quoted corroborate what he says there. The parts that are not quoted are the parts that are sketchy. So the dude obviously made some kind of freaking assumption about this and didn't ask him about it. This part here. The game would be a story about two countries at war on each side of the conflict where two childhood friends re-unjowie, and there were even job system planned for the game like Final Fantasies with 60 different possibilities. He makes a claim like that, but he doesn't quote Murayama to support that claim. So those are the areas which I was not confident to confirm in my video, but the parts where he is quoted directly in not only just in that article, but in the others that I'm looking at, because I have I don't even know how many sources for Suikoden 2. Hold on. Suikoden 1 stuff, but I think I have some here. But anyways, yes, I'm confident in all of these direct quotes, just not in the ones where the authors of the articles said unsubstantiated stuff. He sensationalized it, basically. Yes, correct. Doom Guy. So what I'm thinking about doing, one of my thoughts on how I might want to do this is I'm going to say I reached out to Murayama directly, and this was his response. And I could put on the screen like maybe a zoom in of the email, and then do my little quote animation where the black bar comes across the screen and we have a flip of his portrait. And I could put in Japanese initially what he says, but then do maybe some kind of transition where the English animates on over the top of the Japanese. Something like that, which would give it the sense that this is what he said in Japanese. You see it on the screen. Here's my translation over the top. So anybody who does speak or read Japanese would see that it is legitimate, right? So I'm that's kind of my thought for how to do the quotes specifically on this part or on this issue, so that they see the email. Of course, I would, blur out Murayama's email address so no one will see that, but just into the body of the email, the Japanese itself, we would see what he's saying, and then I would do a blur on the background, animate in my black bar and my little quote animation, put the Japanese in there initially, and then animate English over the top of it. So that I think will legitimize me, so that nobody will question, well, are you just making this up or whatever. Anyways, so I'm thinking the best place to actually put this in is right here at the beginning, which is good. It means we'll get to the meat of what people will probably be clicking here to see right away. Due to being the first party, so to speak, it sold relatively well, meriting a sequel in the eyes of the higher-ups of Konami. So Yoshitaka Murayama, the series creator, got to work thinking about where the series should go next. Let's see. For years, it's been commonly believed that Murayama wrote the story for Suikoden 2 before development on the first game even began. Wait. This is going to be a cumbersome sentence. As the rumor tells it, it was actually conceived while he was working on a game for Konami's own video game console, which was canceled long before it had the chance to hit the market. I spoke more on that in my Suikoden 1 retrospective. For years, it has been commonly believed that Murayama wrote the story for Suikoden 2 before development on the first game ever began. As the rumor tells it, it was actually conceived while he was working on a game for Konami's own video game console, which was canceled long before it had a chance to hit the market. I spoke more on that project in my Suikoden 1 retrospective, and you can find a link to that video in the description, but according to a number of prominent gaming publications, the story for that project was indeed the story of Suikoden 2. After something like that. I don't know if I want to word it quite that way, but this is the idea. How will you balance this with the goal of deepening people's appreciation for Suikoden 2? Some people might take this as bad news, even if it's the truth. To learn that Suikoden 2 wasn't the game Murayama wanted to make from the beginning might make Mega fans angry or disappointed. This is one of those games that people put on a pedestal. I don't think so. I mean, there could be somebody who would be like, oh, it's not as cool of a story as before, but I think any Mega fan would want to know the truth about what happened. Like, they would want to know what the actual truth of the game's development was, more than they would want to believe a false rumor about it. So, at least in my estimation, I wouldn't want to continue to believe a rumor. Like, it's the same thing with Final Fantasy, right? I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and I believed for years the rumor that Squaresoft said, we have been failing as a company, so we're going to make one last game and we'll call it Final Fantasy to be our last hurrah as a company before we go bankrupt. I believed that crap because that's what people said, and it was a romantic idea. That's why the game's called Final Fantasy. But that's not the case at all. The truth is that they wanted just anything that could be abbreviated to FF. They didn't care if it was supposed to be called Fighting Fantasy originally, right? But there was a copyright issue with that title in Japan for a board game, so they went with Final Fantasy because, again, the entire purpose was we just want something that can be abbreviated as FF. That's it. So it's another romanticized rumor. And me, like, I wanted to know the actual truth behind it. Like that was more important to me than confirming the rumor that was romanticized, right? So I think that this will be appreciated by people, even though it isn't as, enticing a story, I guess. The scoop isn't quite as, interesting, maybe. But it's the truth, and people want to know the truth. At least that's how I feel. Something like that, maybe. Yeah, the Squall is dead theory, but that hasn't been rejected by the developers yet, has it? Like, you haven't had, like, Kitase come out and say the Squall is dead rumor is completely fake, right? So that one's a little more dicey because, like, there hasn't been, like, a confirmation that the rumor is false. As far as I'm aware, maybe there has been. I don't know. All right, let's see how this flows. When Suikoden launched in December of 1995, it arrived early enough to become a sprawling RPG land at PS1, a platform which later became nest and haven for the genre as a whole. The timing was fortunate, seeing as powerhouses from Squaresoft were soon to follow, and at that time, I don't want to say funny enough, but something equivalent to that. This is not what I want to say. I want something kind of like a synonym to this, but that timing was fortunate, seeing as powerhouses from Squaresoft were soon to follow. Funny enough, at the time, Suikoden was even considered by some to be a warm-up to games like Final Fantasy VII and Wild Arms. Due to being first to the party, so to speak, it sold relatively well, meriting a sequel in the eyes of the higher-ups at Konami, so Yoshitaka Murayama, the series creator, got to work thinking about where the series should go next. For years, it has been commonly believed that Murayama wrote the story for Suikoden 2 before development on the first game ever began. As the rumor tells it, it was actually conceived while he was working on a game for Konami's own video game console, which was cancelled long before it had a chance to hit the market. I spoke more on that project in my Suikoden 1 retrospective, and you can find a link to that video in the description. But according to a number of prominent gaming publications, the story for that project was indeed the story of Suikoden 2. But after the game was cancelled, they claimed that Murayama decided to write a prequel story in order to gain the experience he felt he lacked before returning to the story he really wanted to tell. This story is actually false. I don't know what to use this word story there. Oz says it has been denied, at least according to my Legend of Final Fantasy VIII book by Remy Lopez. Oh, really? Itase has also confirmed that FF7 and 10 are connected, but I don't accept that either. Well, that for sure was not the intention when Final Fantasy VII was created. There's, that is a really dumb sort of retconny sort of change that they decided on after those games were released. So while that may technically be canon according to the current people at Squaresoft, there was no intention for those games to be connected at the time that Final Fantasy VII was in development or at the time Final Fantasy X was in development. That's just freaking stupid. I don't want to use the word story here. This account, maybe. Fatal Fantasy could have worked. Furby Fantasy, Fantastical Fantasy, or Fanatical Fantasy, Funny Fantasy, Forced Fantasy. Creating new game series ideas is tricky. I guess just the abbreviation of it, the FF part of it, sounds pleasant to the Japanese ear. They like the way FF sounds. So that's what they were going for. They wanted their series to be called FF by people. I even wrote a joke about that, because he says like any F word would have sufficed or something like that. I was like, well, probably not any F word, gooch, but see where you're going with that. Let's see. Maybe rumor. Or these reports. Fetching fantasy, exactly, Dumika. When I was working with Zenmen's, actually, back in the live streams a couple years ago on that RPG Maker game, when we were playing that together, I think I called my project Final Fetching Fantasy or something like that. During the course of my research, I found some conflicting reports regarding... Let's see. How does this read now? But according to a number of prominent gaming publications, the story for that project was indeed the story of Suikoden 2. But after the game was cancelled, they claimed that Murayama decided to write a prequel story in order to gain the experience he felt he lacked before returning to the story he really wanted to tell. These reports are actually false. During the course of my research, I found conflicting information regarding this rumor. And decided to reach out to Mr. Murayama personally for clarification. This is what he told me. Then we'll quote him there. Clear it up. So I guess I feel okay about this. I'll have to wait until I get the actual full translation. And then continue on from there. But this is going to be great. I'm really stoked about this. So I'll leave this here for now. Hopefully, I'll get a response from Zenmen's tomorrow, and then on Monday I can return and sort of like finish writing this. In the meantime, maybe I can return to what I was writing yesterday. Oz says Katase denied both the Squall is dead and Renoa is Ultimecia theories at a PAX panel. He thought they were both really humorous and fascinating and joked that maybe he would play into them if he ever remade the game. Fantasy, fantasy! Rob says that was more or less how I heard it. Interesting. I'll have to look into that then. It's nice to have it officially denied, because it is a crazy rumor. It's one of those rumors that was invented in order for fans to fix the problems with the story, right? Because there are like obvious plot holes and really like gaps of pretty large gaps of logic in FF8's story, and I feel like the Squall is dead theory was invented to try and address those criticisms of it. And anyways, it always felt like that to me anyways. Let's see. Get this back over here. Oh, working on this Sephiroth video. See how we feel about it now. Oh, Pez is, that's what Pez does best, man, is the creation and exploration of theories, fan theories, right? Zenmen's is the community MVP for this video, absolutely. Zenmen's will get a very special thanks in the video, no doubt about it. Maybe a tip of the hat to Heon, who has given me a little clarification on certain things as well. Okay. One of the most striking memories I have with video games was this moment in Final Fantasy VII, after you cross the marshes near the Chocobo farm and witness the chilling aftermath of a savage impalement. After spending hours figuring out how to bypass the Midgar Zolom, an aggressive, powerful monster which could easily annihilate your party, you come through on the other side and find one, or you come on the other side only to find one staked on the trunk of a barren tree, presumably brutalized by the very man you are in pursuit of. The characters, overwhelmed by this unthinkable display of power, look on in silence, while Cloud gives voice to the only question he can manage after observing such a terrifying spectacle. Did Sephiroth do this? There's no question that this character has become one of the most iconic in all of gaming, and as is often the case with properties that become massively popular, naysayers emerge to debate their impact and significance. Many times I've seen Sephiroth downgraded in these discussions, depicted as a shallow character who is only beloved by fans of FF7 because he looks cool. While there's no doubt the design of the character had something to do with its popularity, I think it's often overlooked. No doubt is that the design of the character had something to do with his popularity. I think it's often overlooked just how brilliantly, I use that word a lot, don't I? Brilliantly. Just how find a synonym for it. Oh, they're gonna. Oh, genius. Aptly would work. Aptly isn't quite right either. Expertly. That's a good word. It's often overlooked just how expertly this character was introduced. Through clever something like that. Dude McGuy's bringing up that you might want to change for the word naysayer. There's no question that this character has become one of the most iconic in all of gaming. This is often the case with properties that become massively popular. Detractors, maybe, instead of naysayers. Critics. Become one of the most iconic in all of gaming, and as is often the case with properties that become massively popular, critics emerge to debate their impact and significance. Many times I've seen Sephiroth downgraded in these discussions, depicted as a shallow character who is only beloved by fans of FF7 because he looks cool. While there's no doubt the design of the character had something to do with his popularity, I think it's often overlooked just how expertly this character was introduced. I say the character before. Expertly, Sephiroth was introduced through extremely clever storytelling, building him into a truly terrifying force of nature by showing what he was capable of. Rather than telling the audience. Get rid of that, that's cumbersome. Rather than telling the audience through character dialogue. There's no question that this character has become one of the most iconic in all of gaming, and as is often the case with properties that become massively popular, people will debate their impact and significance. There's no question that this character has become one of the most iconic in all of gaming, and is often the case with properties that become massively popular. People will debate their impact and significance. Many times I've seen Sephiroth downgraded in these discussions, depicted as a shallow character who is only beloved by fans of FF7 because he looks cool. While there's no doubt the design of the character had something to do with his popularity, I think it's often overlooked just how expertly Sephiroth was introduced through extremely clever storytelling, building him into a truly terrifying force of nature by showing what he was capable of, rather than telling the audience character dialogue. In a lot of ways, Sephiroth was written like a villain in a horror film. Something like that, maybe? You know what I should do? I've heard I have heard similarities brought up between like the scene in the Shinra building and like the tone of like John Carpenter's The Thing, which is a movie I have not seen. So I'm thinking maybe what I should do for this is buy that movie. This, right? 1982 horror movie, The Thing. Maybe I should watch this movie and see if I can find a tie-in to this with Sephiroth. Because isn't there some evidence that Sephiroth was actually inspired by this movie? Or that Jenova was inspired by this movie, I should say? I've seen the remake of this movie, I think. What was it? I watched it at some girl's house who I was kind of dating at the time. This version of it? I think I saw this version of it. Let me see. This is it. Okay, I'm gonna silence it. I just want to see if this is the one I watched. I think so. Yes. I saw this version of the movie. There was a girl who I was into probably around this time, actually, in Denver. I was living in Denver. Anyways, I think I had gone back to visit Denver or something to see her. I can't remember. Anyways, I saw this movie with her one night at her parents' house. But I've not seen the original movie. So I feel like I should do that. Oz says some of the greatest practical effects of all time. Freaking enough looking for it. Carpenter's is a remake. Oh, John Carpenter's is a remake? So there's an even older version than this? The Thing is interesting because it was despised by critics when it was released, but has become a cult classic since then. Yeah, that's kind of how Blade Runner was too, right? And what else? There was some other movie that people didn't like at first, and then Evil Dead 2 maybe, or well, maybe that one, and then some other one I was thinking of. I can't remember what it was. Oh, The Shining. The Shining was the same way. I have seen The Shining. People did not like The Shining when it first was released, and now it's kind of like considered one of the best horror films ever. The original is from the 50s or so. It plays on the TV as a homage to Carpenter's Halloween from 1978. Rob says, I seem to recall it was one of the earliest movies to set a stunt guy on fire. Oh, wow. Well, I should look into this. Why is this is probably just for the trailer. Anyways, let me look into this, maybe. Maybe I'll watch this tonight or something. Yeah, let's do it. I can get footage from it if I need to. All right, here we go. We have the movie in HD. I'll watch this at some point today. Ooh, nice. And see if there's some kind of parallel that could be drawn with Genova in this somehow. I seem to recall that Heon really thought this movie was brilliant, and thought that there was a tie. I'll ask him if he has a source on that, to this being the inspiration for Genova. It'll also be nice because this video may be released sometime around Halloween, so that could be cool. The musical? What's this?
I've been running for miles, and once I convince you that I'm a dog, you can check.
Okay, I'm gonna silence that, but I get the idea. Nice. That's awesome. Okay, so that's something to do later. That'll be fun. Do I have Alien? I have Alien on DVD, so I don't need to buy it here. Alien's so good. That's one of my favorite films. Freaking awesome movie. I have all kinds of recommendations. I liked Prometheus all right. I know it has problems, but I liked it okay. Hey, look, it's that movie that everyone thinks I'm quoting when I say fetch, that I don't quote because I never saw it. Alright, I'll watch that later. His Predator, the musical, is just the best thing ever. I'll have to watch that too. Okay, I know it's a little bit of a shorter stream today, but I think I'm going to stop now, because on both fronts for both scripts, I kind of think I want to wait on the full translation from Murayama's email to me before I continue with that one. And on this one, I think I want to watch The Thing first to see if I can find a connection to him being written like a horror villain, and see if I can find some way to tie that into a movie, and then go into finishing that script. So I will return on Monday. Here's the Predator musical.
Thing is too fast, we won't make it, it's pointless to run.
Oh, he actually, like, sang this one?
Talk, no more games.
I don't know what it was. The jungle came alive.
Go on.
It happened very fast.
I haven't actually seen this movie.
Not easy to describe, but you must have wounded it, unless my eyes deceive. When
I'll wait to see the movie first, and then I'll watch this later. Prometheus solves the prequel problem by not revealing it's a prequel until the movie is almost over. This clip is worth your time.
You son of a bitch.
That's
Dylan!
funny.
You son of a bitch.
This is from Indiana Jones, right? Isn't this the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull scene? Oh, no, wait. I guess it's from whatever that movie is.
What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils? Huh?
Oh, they start arm wrestling?
Had enough? Make it easy on yourself, Dutch.
Okay, so here's the thing to understand about my gap in terms of classic movies that I've seen. So I grew up religious. My family was very religious. And in Mormonism, there is this, it's not actually true, but there is this rumor commonly believed among people in the religion that rated R movies are like essentially that a general authority, like a leader in the church, said that you should not watch rated R movies. So for like the great majority of my life, rated R movies were like a taboo in my household. Like my parents wouldn't see them. They wouldn't let us see them. And the idea was like, you just don't see rated R movies. If it's rated R, you don't go watch it. It wasn't until probably I was like well, I guess not 19 because I was on my mission then, but probably 21 years old. I got back from my mission and I started to just watch rated R movies because there's nothing that substantiates that idea that some general authority of the church told you can't watch rated R movies. Like that's never actually been said. Kind of like this, I actually looked into it and found out there was never such a thing ever said. So I've been kind of catching up over the years on things that I wasn't allowed to see when I was younger. So there's a good chance that if a movie is rated R, even something like what's that movie? I've actually used it a couple times. Schindler's List. Even a movie like Schindler's List, I wouldn't have seen because of the rated R taboo. But I have been catching up on them. But anyways, that's a big part of the reason why I hadn't seen Braveheart, which I have seen now. I hadn't seen Shawshank Redemption. I hadn't seen like all these amazing films that I have now seen, Alien and a few others, because they're rated R. So I haven't seen The Predator. I haven't seen The Thing. These are probably two I should put on the short list to see now. People have been noting the similarities between Genova and The Thing for a while, but there is no confirmation from the creators of that being true, as far as I'm aware, says Dubika. Oh, the 2012 Apocalypse movie. Yeah, I remember the one you're talking about. All that time I wasted sending you games in the mailbag, I should have sent you more movies. Thing and The Predator are both well worth seeing. Well, awesome. I'm going to watch The Thing tonight for sure. And then maybe I'll consider getting The Predator next. But as far as that goes, I am done for today. Actually, restore those. I don't know if I want to get rid of them. I might just store them somewhere else. Thanks for watching. You guys are great. I appreciate your support. And I will see you again on Monday to continue working on the Suikoden 2 video script. Peace out. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Later.